Good afternoon to all the students who have joined us today at this fortnight program organized by Board of Studies Academic of ICAI for CA final course students appearing in November 2026 examinations. Today is the third session in this program. We have already covered 2 sessions. So today we'll be covering paper 3, Advanced Auditing, Assurance and Professional Ethics. The session would be taken by CA Achal Jain, the subject faculty, and by CA Karuna Bansali, our BOS faculty. Both the faculties have already joined with us. We welcome you, Achal sir and Karuna ma'am, for this session. Students, the faculties would be discussing on certain selective and important topics and aspects from this paper. The faculties would also be taking the queries which you have submitted to us on this paper. So we request you to please take a note of all the important inputs and points which the faculties would be sharing with you. You will find them very helpful for your examination preparation. And we have one more request to make to you. At the end of each session, please do fill the feedback form, which is available in the same link through which you are viewing this session. Your feedback helps us to understand your learning needs even better. So please do fill the feedback form. So with this, I hand over the session to Karuna ma'am. Over to you, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Rita ma'am. Thank you very much. And welcome, Achal. Good afternoon, my dear students. This fortnight program unlocks success through clarity, strategy, and confidence. It will not only improve your conceptual clarity in important topics, but it will also bridge the gap. It will also update you with the amendments, like those amendments which are applicable for your November 2026 examination. Apart from that, we will also be taking all your queries with the help of some tips, with the help of PPT, and of course, that ABC analysis for which you wait will also be forming part of this fortnight program for CA Final Paper 3. As you know, that auditing is a subject where you need to have knowledge of other subject also. You need to interlink that, and one very important aspect, that is your engagement and quality control standards, right? So you are generally worried of standards. So I will begin with a small couplet, like standards may seem endless. Standards may seem endless and pages may seem wide. But with every careful revision, you are building strength inside. Read the facts, find the issue. Read the facts, find the issues, know the standard well, apply to that situation, let your reasoning tell. This is telling you that generally we are afraid that so many standards are there, our syllabus is so bulky, how to cover, lot many pages are there, how to revise, we are not able to recall, we are not able to write the required answer, how to build the strength, how to pass in the auditing, how to get exemption, right? And here in the second para, what I mentioned, read the fact, find the issue, because the problem starts with the misunderstanding of the facts. If we read the fact given in the question carefully, we identify the issue, what is being asked in the question, what is the requirement of the question. If it is based on the standard, then know the standard well and interlinking it Apply it to the situation. Let your reasoning tell. Means if the question is based on either standard or on any other provision or professional ethics, if you are mentioning those provisions, please apply it to the situation, interlink the same, and then your reason, your answer should be based on them. Concepts clear, presentation bright. Write your answer with insights. Your conceptual clarity is very much essential. When you are going for November examination, you are only able to understand the requirement. You will only be able to understand the requirement if you are having conceptual clarity. Your presentation should be in such a manner that reader can easily identify what you really want to tell. Because I have also personally interacted with some of the students. They are just giving reference of clause number, they are just writing essay number and giving their conclusion. So that will not help you in getting good marks, because presentation matters. So concepts clear, presentation bright, write your answers with insight, headings, points, and conclusions strong. That's how your answer will belong. When a difficult question appears, don't let your confidence fall. When a difficult question appears, don't let your confidence fall. Think like an auditor. Stay calm and give your best to every call. You are our future chartered accountant. In for any of the difficult question, you need to think from the auditor's perspective, that if I am a qualified chartered accountant and I am here for audit, how I will deal with that particular situation. Then you will really find it interesting and you will be able to answer the same. Read, recall, revise, apply. Read, recall, revise, apply. Let your preparation reach the sky. With every question that you write, you are moving closer to your goal in sight. Ethics, standards, assurance too. There is nothing that you cannot do. Keep your focus, trust your plan, give your best, be the CA you can. Give your best, be the CA you can, right? So this is a small poem which really address many of your questions that we have tried to cover in this chota sa poem couplet, right? So dear students, please remember that audit may test you, but never fear. With every revision, success comes near. Understand the concept, apply it right, present your answer with clarity and might. Stay calm, stay focused, keep confidence high. Your CA dream is within the sky, right? So here I stop my couplet, and now we are moving to our next steps, which we are going to cover in our fortnight session, right? So today's session we have designed in such a manner that we will be covering not only ABC analysis, not only important tips to be successful, but also amendments which are applicable for your November 2026 examination. So I think we are going to start with that, and we are having a very learned faculty, Achal sir. So Achal sir will be taking you through NBFC amendments and professional ethics. And I hope you all have seen the revisionary test paper, wherein all the amendments are being covered. New questions are also being asked in the RTP. So not taking much of the time, Achal sir, over to you.
Hi. Thank you, Kanna ma'am. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon, everyone. Uh, I think it's a wonderful opportunity which you have provided for sharing some insights with the students. And this poem which you just sort of laid out, this clearly brings out all the aspects that anyways are planned to be covered. So I think in a way we have already spoken about what is really required to be covered today, but we'll now try to get into some of the details of the aspects that you have discussed. So I'll just quickly share the presentation. okay, wherein we'll discuss as to, how some of the things we are planning to cover today. So of course, we'll talk about the important topics, some of the challenging topics that you come across in terms of your strategy for writing the answers, revision strategy, in terms of the examination pattern as to what you get to see. What are the commonly found mistakes that you have in the examination, which you can work upon? And of course, most important of all happens to be the time management. Now, quickly, if you look at the breakdown of this entire curriculum, you can just simply understand that there are certain areas which carry a significant weightage. At the same time, there are certain chapters, or you can say some small topics from which you can expect some sort of short questions in the examination. So for example, if you talk about these engagement and quality control standards, okay, so this carries a significant weightage. So you have this 45 to 55% covered through them, right? So you can just understand that this is going to be your focus area. Similarly, when you talk about professional ethics, liabilities of the auditors, this is again a focus area. Why? Because this covers a significant portion, 17 to 24%. This is something that you cover from this. And then, of course, you have these two small topics when you talk about digital audit or when you talk about emerging areas. Yeah, so there again, you find every time there is a question, even though this percentage seems to be 3 to 6, but you can say this is something which is assured. So this is how you actually plan. Okay, so this will really help you. And of course, from the remaining part, it doesn't mean you will not consider that. You will of course consider that, but that remaining part happens to be around 17 to 24%. Okay, now before I move on to this ABC analysis, I'll just now move on to the amendments which are there. Now there is a significant part of the amendment that we will try to cover today. Now amendments are extremely important. Now why are these amendments important? Why? Because these are, you can say, is something which is new to the examiner also, if you look at it from the perspective of the examiner. Yeah, and I would say that as per my understanding, this happens to be one of the favorite areas. So you can say something that you'll always want to focus upon. You should always be focusing upon one of the things which is called as amendments. Why? Because it's new, so that's why it's highly likely it's going to be picked up for the examination. So you can just simply understand, a bit complex, but some of these aspects that we are going to discuss today, you can say, are more conceptual. Of course, you'll have to learn that to a certain extent, but if you understand the concept around it as to what is the amendment, why the amendment has come in place, then the learning becomes easier. Okay, and then of course there are some amendments in relation to the ethics, code of conduct. So that is again one of the part we are going to discuss. So I'll just start my discussion with this NBFC piece. Okay, now in terms of this NBFC, what has really changed? What is the exemption which has been there? So if you look at the criteria for the NBFCs, so now we have this registration exemption for certain categories of NBFCs. Okay, now where do they come from? So they come from this RBI registration exemption and framework for scale-based regulation amendment directions 2026. Now what has changed? Okay, while the registration directions 2025, they didn't introduce any sort of substantive change from the SBR directions. So thus this current amendment, this introduces a 3-category definitional framework for the NBFC registration. Okay, why? Because this provides a window for a category of NBFCs to deregister if at all they meet some criteria. Yeah, so this becomes effective from 1st July 26, and of course this deregistration window is something which remains up to 31st December 2026. Now who is going to benefit out of this? So there are some target micro NBFCs, private investment vehicles, holding companies, and family offices. So basically you can say entities that bore a disproportionate compliance burden simply because their balance sheet satisfied the 50/50 test. Yeah. So what is the objective? That if, let's suppose, the NBFC doesn't have any public funds, customer interface, then some sort of relief from this registration should be provided to them. So let's look at this 3-category registration framework which is in place now. Now this is also something which you can always compare with the chapter. So you can go refer the module. So in the module you can just simply read this page 14.90, and that is how you need to now look at this amendment. Okay. So unregistered type 1 NBFCs, if let's suppose their customer interface is strictly none, public funds are again strictly none, whether direct or indirect, their asset size threshold is less than 1000 crore. Okay, so that's when they become exempt from this registration criteria as per section 45I. Okay, so that's the relief you can say which is available to them. Now, when you talk about the other two categories, when you talk about type 1 NBFC, type 2 NBFC, okay, now irrespective of these criterias, in respect of customer interface, public funds, asset size threshold, they will continue to have the criteria for certificate of registration. Yeah, so that's the relief which is available to this particular category. Okay, so if you talk about existing NBFCs, including those already holding a certificate of registration as type 1 NBFC, that now meet the criteria for this one. Okay, that now meets this criteria for unregistered exempt criteria. So they may apply for deregistration by 31st December 2026. Right? So that's about the deregistration. Now, next one. Now, with the reference of this circular, which you can see, okay. So now when you talk about non-deposit taking NBFCs, which has a minimum of 60% of its total assets on a net basis, netted by the intangible assets on an ongoing basis, which are deployed towards microfinance loans, right? So that's how you will define these NBFCs MFI. Now for these NBFCs, there's a remediation which is required. Why? Because if let's suppose there's a breach of microfinance asset test by these NBFCs for 4 consecutive quarters. So if an NBFC MFI fails to maintain this 60% microfinance asset criteria for 4 consecutive quarters, it shall approach the RBI with a remediation plan for the bank to take a view. Yeah, so that's where the RBI will take a view as to whether this is sort of considered or not. Okay, now 60% of the total assets must be deployed towards qualifying microfinance loans, which is tested on an ongoing basis. If let's suppose there's a breach on this, that's where they are required to get into a remediation. Next, now we have this layer-wise capital adequacy. So it's a framework which is in place. Now, what do you have? Every applicable NBFC, which is defined in the master direction, shall maintain minimum capital ratios depending on the layer it occupies under the SVR frame. Now, we had this RBI NBFC prudential norms on capital adequacy directions 2025. Yeah, that was effective 28 November 25. Now this as updated as on 1st July 2026. Now, what is the change which is going to be in place? So let's try to look at that. But before that, let's understand some of these formulas, because these formulas will need there. CRAR. So what is the formula for that? Tier 1 capital plus Tier 2 capital plus risk weighted assets. Now, how do you get this Tier 1 capital ratio? So Tier 1 capital divided by risk weighted assets. CET1 capital ratio, how do you get that? So common equity Tier 1 capital divided by risk weighted assets. Okay, now Now, what is this minimum capital ratios by the regulatory layer? So now, in respect of the NBFCs, which are into this gold jewelry lending, okay, so that is where the applicability will have to look at. If let's suppose gold loans are greater than or equal to 50% of their financial assets, any layer doesn't matter. Yeah. So what is the minimum tier 1 they need to have? 12%, and minimum CRAR 15%. And there's one additional requirement. What is that? Tier 2 shall not exceed 100% of tier 1 at any time. So that's the criteria they have. Now, when you talk about NBFC middle layer, okay, so and above. Now, this is the one which is other than, you can say, gold jewelry lending NBFCs. Now, in that case, what is the criteria? Minimum tier 1 you have 10%, and minimum CRAR again 15%. No additional requirement is there. NBFC's upper layer that you have, all requirements in relation to this B plus CET1 floor. Okay, so that's the minimum which is required. Now, this minimum CET1 of 9% of aggregate risk-weighted assets is the additional requirement. So here again, you have this minimum tier 1M, minimum CRAR. Then when you look at this NBFC's top layer, so there again, you have the all requirements as in case of the C plus RBI specific charge. Additional requirement over here is higher capital charge as communicated by RBI at classification. Okay. If you talk about this NBFC's base layer, other than gold jewelry lending NBFCs, okay, so therein you do not have any such specification of minimum tier 1 and this CRAR, but the additional requirement is about the leverage ratio. Okay, so how do you get that? Total outside liabilities divided by own funds. That has to be less than or equal to 7. So that's the criteria. Now, when you talk about this tier 1 capital, now how do you get that? So what is going to be the composition around it? For NBFCs, other than NBFCs, this BL category that you have, okay, base layer. Tier 1 capital is the sum of own net fund, net of specified investments, which is reduced by investments in shares of other NBFCs and in shares, debentures, bonds, outstanding loans, advances. Okay. To end deposits with subsidiaries and group companies where these exceed 10% of own funds in aggregate. Now, if you look at some of these points, like for example, tier 1 capital composition. Okay, of course, you can just try to understand this part, but I think to a certain extent, you'll also have to learn these because you'll have to apply some of these things in the questions also. You never know. So that's why it's better that you learn some of these provisions as well. So now the other part in terms of summation. So one is owned fund net of specified investment. The second one will be the perpetual debt instruments. So which is issued by non-deposit taking NBFC in each year. To the extent it doesn't exceed 15% of aggregate tier 1 capital of the company as on 31st March of the previous financial year. Okay. Now, in this case, there's one note. NBFC's base layer are not eligible to include perpetual debt instruments in their tier 1 capital. Okay, so that's where you had this exclusion, or you can say exception for the base layer, because for base layer you will not include this, right? Now, for tier 2 capital composition and the discounting, now what do you have? For tier 2 capital, NBFCs other than NBFC base layer is the sum of all of these 6 points. Preference shares other than compulsorily convertible, revaluation reserves at a discounted rate of 55%, general provisions, loss reserves not attributable to specific assets recognition up to 1 to 1.25% of risk-weighted assets, hybrid debt capital instruments, subordinated debt, so discounted per remaining maturity. Okay, so this table you can just refer for the same as to what is the discount you'll do on the book value in terms of the remaining maturity. Yeah, so accordingly you can just take it. Okay, PDI in excess of what qualifies for tier 1 capital. Now here again, if you look at this aggregate tier 2, it shall not at any time exceed tier 1. So that's the criteria we understand. NBFC's base layer are not eligible to include perpetual debt instruments in their tier 2 capital either. So you had this requirement for tier 1 and you have this requirement for tier 2 capital also. Okay. Next, common equity tier 1, CET1. Okay. Now, what is the definition and what are the requirements you'll have for this? So it's the highest quality slice of tier 1 capital. Broadly, what do they include? Paid up equity capital, that's one. Security premium, statutory or capital or other free reserves, and retained earning, less specified regulatory deductions. Say, for example, goodwill is there, intangibles are there, deferred tax assets are there. So these are the one you will deduct, you will reduce. Okay, so now this CET1 is basically equivalent to tier 1 capital, further reduced by, you can say, first is perpetual debt instruments, which are included in tier 1. Then you have this goodwill, other intangible assets. Then you have these specified deferred tax assets, or if in case there are some other regulatory deductions. Okay, so these are the one you will exclude. So if you exclude some of these items from the tier 1 capital, that's where you get the common equity tier 1. Now, where do you have this applicability? NBFC upper layer, NBFC top layer must additionally maintain CET1 of at least 9% of aggregated risk-weighted assets. Okay, this requirement doesn't apply to NBFC base layer or middle layer. Now, weighted risk assets. Now, in respect of infrastructure loans and additions of ROU, so you have these directions, RBI non-bank NBFC concentration risk management directions, which talks about this high quality infrastructure projects. So now what are the conditions on sanctioned project debt? So if, let's suppose, borrower is repaid at least 2% of sanctioned project debt, so risk weight is 75%. If the borrower has repaid at least 5%, risk weight becomes 50%. For the other assets, okay, including the ROU, you have this risk weight of 100%. So in this case, there are some provisos which are also required to be considered alongside. If a project subsequently fails to meet high quality infrastructure conditions, it reverts to risk weights prescribed under this category that we just discussed of the table. Repayment threshold is determined on the sanctioned project debt. Okay, so any additional debt sanctioned on takeover or otherwise is clubbed with prior loans against the same project assets or cash flows. Exposures attracting a lower risk weight under the guidelines applicable up to 31st March 26 may continue at the extent risk weight till the next review or renewal, or 31st March 27, whichever is earlier. So that's how you need to look at it. Now, we have this another sort of change coming into the standard asset provisioning rates. So this is again a category wise bifurcation you'll have to look at. For the NBFC's middle layer, so it's 0.40 of the outstanding, including microfinance loans, not reckoned in arriving at net NPAs. So that's how actually you look at it. For the NBFC's upper layer, now what are the categories and what are the provisioning rate you'll have to consider? For individual housing loans or the loans to SMEs, 0.25. Housing loans at teaser rates, this is decreasing to 0.4 1 year after reset, is still standard 2%. Advances to commercial real estate, residential housing, 0.75. Advances to commercial real estate other than this commercial real estate residential housing, 1%. Restructured advances per resolution of stressed assets directions. Okay, so that you will refer. All other loans and advances, including the medium enterprises, you will consider 0.4%. Next. Now, in this small example, we can just also look at this computation as to how do you compute it. So we have this NBFC upper layer, which has a following standard assets outstanding at the end. So individual housing loans are there, 200 crore. So what rate you will apply? 0.25%. Okay. So 0.25%. For commercial real estate, other than commercial real estate, residential house advances. So we discussed it has to be 1%. Okay, so 50 crore, 1% you will apply. For the other loans, this category, we discussed it's 0.4. So the amount is 100 crore, 0.4. So if you apply this, what do you get? This is how you get the total provision of 1.4 crore. Okay. So this is how you are required to consider the provisioning on the standard assets. Now, some of the additional requirements that you have for DLG cover and restructuring provisions. So when you talk about default loss guarantee cover, an NBFC may factor in default loss guarantee cover while computing Ind AS ECL provisions, subject to conditions which are specified by Reserve Bank. Right? So means the ones which are prescribed by accounting standard. When you talk about provisionings on restructured advances, on implementation of resolution plan under chapter 6A of this resolution of stressed asset directions 25, an additional specific provision of 5% of outstanding debt is required per instance of restructuring, capped at 100%. Okay. It's written back once the borrower repays at least 20% of the debt, not before that. Okay, without slipping back into NPA. Okay, next. Now we will also look at some of the amendments, or you can say updates that we have in relation to some of these ethical requirements as well. So there's an amendment to this clause 9. Okay, part 1 of first schedule. A chartered accountant in practice is deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he/she accepts an appointment as an auditor of a company without first ascertaining from it whether the requirements of Section 225 of the Companies Act 1956, okay, or Section 139 to 141 of Companies Act 2013, or any other law pertaining to the appointment of auditors have been duly complied with. So basically, what are we trying to achieve here? Clause now recognizes both 1956 Act and 2013 Act, plus any other law which is required to be considered by the chartered accountant. So basically, the auditor cannot just run away saying that this is something I have looked at. Auditor is required to look at all the laws and regulations. Otherwise, he will be considered to be guilty of professional misconduct. So you can say the horizon has been widened for the auditor to get into some of these considerations. Then we have this insertion of clause 5 in part 2, second schedule. A chartered accountant in practice is deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he/she acts as an auditor of a company in contravention of provisions of Companies Act. See, this is a newly inserted standalone ground of professional misconduct under the schedule. It broadens accountability beyond the appointment stage compliance to cover auditors' continuing conduct while acting in the role wherever that conduct contravenes the Companies Act. See, the objective is that while the chartered accountant is getting appointed as the auditor, of course, he'll look into it as to whether there is ethically he can just accept that or not. Okay, so some of the compliances he will look into. But let's suppose now the auditor is appointed and now the engagement is going on. So during this period, will he be required to look into all of those ethical requirements? Answer is yes. He needs to continue that because it's not something which gets over at the time of appointment. It continues throughout. And so it's something which has to be an ongoing process, which has to be throughout, which is not going to come to an end. right? Now, we also have some guidelines, or you can say some sort of ceiling in a way, on the number of tax audits. So let's understand what is that. So in respect of the tax audit, Council has decided the following limits. First, 60 audits per member. Per member means per chartered accountant per financial year. Now, this existing limit of 60 tax audit assignments per member is retained, but it is applied in respect of tax audit assignments in a particular financial year. Next, limit of the 60 is aggregate for all tax audits accepted and signed by a member, both in an individual capacity and as a partner of a firm. So a member cannot say that in my individual capacity I have 60, as a partner of a firm I have another 60. No. So in totality it's 60. So an individual member cannot sign more than 60 tax audit reports in a financial year. So that's how it's required to be looked at. Further, it's non-transferable. So let's suppose a partner has got only 50. So can he pass on 10 to another, say, chartered accountant, and the other chartered accountant can do 70? Therefore, answer is no. So the limit on number of tax audit assignments per partner in a CA firm cannot be distributed or shared between the partners. So it has to be individual specific, right? So there's a carve out for presumptive taxation. This limit of 60 doesn't apply to tax audit assignments which are arising from some of the clauses of C, D, E of section 44 AB, which is in relation to the persons covered under section 44 A, ADA, AD, which is about presumptive taxation. So that means in respect of these clients, additional tax audits can also be covered if that crosses 60. Okay, only for this. Revised reports. Let's suppose there's a revision of a tax audit report. Okay. Now the revised report is not to be taken into account for the purpose of reckoning 60. Let's suppose an auditor has signed off 60. Okay. Let's suppose 25th tax audit report is now required to be revised. Sometimes there may be an error. So that's required to be revised. So can we say that now this 60 limit is done, so that's why he can't get on to that? No. So he can do that. Otherwise that revision will not be possible. Okay. So that's why revision will not be considered within this count. So due to that revision, if let's suppose that count increases to say 61, 62, 63, that is okay. Of course, you'll not have too many revisions anyways, but if at all there's a count increase due to the revision, so that is acceptable. That is good to go, right? Now, I think this is just a summary of some of these updates or some of these amendments that we just talked about. The idea was to just bring it out in a single slide in terms of giving you an overview as to what is it that has changed and how that is really required to be put in place. And this will also help you, you can say, a sort of ready reference, because at the time of examination, you need some quick references, some short summaries for the quick flip through, right? So I think that's where it will help you to a great extent. Okay, so with this, we are through in terms of our discussions on the amendments. Now, before we move further, I think we can just discuss some of your questions. And I understand you have sent across a lot of questions. So we have just tried to put through your questions and we'll try to discuss that now.
Yes. Yes. So dear students, Achal sir has very nicely and he explained all the amendments which are applicable for your November 2026 examination. NBFC amendments which generally students feel it's very tricky, it's difficult, but he explained in very simply, with very simple, he made it so simple in the form of PPT that yes, anyone can understand the same. And if you have gone through the RTP, you might have seen there is one question framed on the exemption part and BFC amendment, and one case scenario is also having amendments being covered in this tax audit limit wala. So please practice with the help of revisionary test paper, and we have received lot many queries from the students, and for that also Achal sir has prepared slides so that each and every query can be taken properly so that your doubts get resolved, and then we will move towards our tips, right? So I think Achal sir, we are going to take the queries of the students, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'll just share that document also so that the other students can also get a reference of what all queries have come in, and what all queries other students might be having, because sometimes you may have sent across only one query, but maybe there are some other queries which you may face later on. So what
Right.
we have tried to do is we have just tried to compile all of these queries at one place, because there were a lot of queries, and of course this query database that we had, which have sort of compiled, this was,
But
I think, maybe
Achal sir,
2 days
after
earlier.
this also we have received lot many queries.
Exactly, yeah. So
So
of
till the
course,
time we prepared PPT, we have addressed all. But yes,
right.
after that also, yeah.
Correct, correct. So, of course, some of those which we have received after that, we are also going to discuss that part. But most of your queries, I believe, will be able to wrap up through the discussion that we are going to have in terms of some of these queries. So, if you look at the compilation, sort of, you can say majority of your queries have been around this aspect related to this answer writing and the presentation. Okay, majority as
Yes.
to how do you write the answer, how do you present it in the exam. Then of course the next one, which is about the revision strategy and the syllabus coverage. Then there are a lot of queries around this verbatim, whether we write in our own words versus the language. The language is tough, the language is technical. Do we quote essays? Do we don't quote essays? Okay. And of course, some of the discussions around the low scores and the exam practice. So we are going to pick up all of these one by one. Okay, and this is again the order in terms of the number of queries that we have. So let's discuss all of these queries one by one, and of course I would request Karuna ma'am to add to this, because she will be able to guide you to a great extent in respect to some of these exam oriented tips as well. Answer writing and presentation technique. Okay, so of course you can see the number as 15, but I'm sure each and every one will have this query. So we also have the number, sorry, we also have the names of the students who have sent across. Of course, we can't put the names of all because a lot of queries keep coming. So you can say Dilip is there, Dipesh, Archie, Shivani, Sandeep, Sumit, right, Sarvanan. A lot of students had this query around the answer writing and the presentation technique. So, Karna ma'am, would you like to share some insights around the answer writing and the presentation technique?
Yeah, sure, sure. So, dear students, as you all are aware that in the examination, we are having three skills prescribed. One is knowledge and comprehension, second is application analysis, and third is evaluation and synthesis, right? And if we carefully observe the pattern of the paper, for 30 marks, there are MCQs, and for 70 marks, we are having descriptive paper, right? And as you all are aware that in paper one, I think Shilpa madam told you that this time from November 26 examination onwards, the pattern is change. MCQ will be again of 30 marks only, but earlier we used to have 15 MCQs. But now onwards, we will be having total 23 MCQs. 7 will be of 2 marker and rest will be of 1 marker. And these can be in combination of case scenario or independent application based MCQ, right? So all the MCQs are application based only. So you need to gear up, you need to practice more, and while writing the answer, because your first question is on writing and presentation technique. So as I mentioned you, knowledge and comprehension means a simple question is being asked which based on the provisions or like advantage is asked or disadvantage or any other provision is simply being asked, which you need to answer on the basis of your memory, right? You need not to apply that provision in the situation and conclude. So for those, if the question is of 4 marks, if the pointers are proper one, not small one, and the requirement of the question is again commensurate with 4 marks, you need to write 4 complete points. If you are preparing your notes, you have segregated 1 point into 2 to 3 sub points for your ease. In the examination, you need to write 4 complete points for 4 marks, right? For 5 marks, 5 complete points are definitely required from your side. If like you have segregated 1 point into 3 points in the examination, what you did for 4 marks, you think that yes, I need to write only 4 points. You wrote all these 3 points which you have segregated of 1 and then 1 additional point. Technically, you are attempting only 1.25 marks paper. So you have to be very careful that you need to write 4 complete points. Other than changing words with different words or in different language, if you are writing the same, for that particular point, only 1 mark is allocated, so only 1 mark will be provided for that. So for 4 marks, you have to be very careful that you have to write 4 complete pointers. Now moving towards application and analysis, right? But yeah, sometimes it also happens that requirement of the question is 5 pointers are asked and that question is of 4 marks. Then you have to write those 5 pointers, right? Because whatever is the requirement of the question, your answer should commensurate with the same. जो आपसे पूछा है आपको उसका आंसर देना है, उसका किसी भी पार्ट को you cannot miss. But yes, complete point आपको लिखने हैं, right? If we move towards application and analysis part, application and analysis part means you need to apply the provisions. If the question is based on professional ethics, if the question is based on standards on auditing, right? You need to write that clause. If standard based, then you need to write that standard number, standards name, required part of that standard. You need to mention fact of the case, interlink both. And after explaining with the help of that, you need to conclude the same also. Stepwise marking is there. There may be marking for provision and explanation, conclusion, fact of the case, and giving reference of relevant clause, provision, or standard. So please do not miss out. Sometimes students are giving reference of provision, writing fact, but they are not interlinking it and just give conclusion. So that will also not help you. For the conclusion, you need to interlink and then you need to reach to the conclusion, that how you have reached to that conclusion based on those provisions applying in that particular situation. So very important, you need to read the requirement of the question, apply that provision, interlink with the fact of the case, and then conclude. So all the steps are covered and you will get the marks. And if the question is of evaluation and synthesis, means more than one provisions are applicable, more than one clause, more than one situation is being asked, you need to address all. One more important tip is, sometimes the question is being asked from the management perspective or from the auditor's role perspective. While answering, you need to be careful that question is asking from the management's perspective or auditor's perspective. If they are asking about contention of management, you need to answer on the basis of that only. Your answer should be framed that you are answering considering the contention of the management. At that point of time, you should not write about, means you can write, but at the conclusion stage, you should not emphasize only on the auditor's role or auditor's contention. Your answer should specifically cover comment on the management's contention. If the question specifically asks you about auditor's role, then your answer should specifically cover role of the auditor in that particular situation. right? So I think many points I have covered. One of the student has asked whether we need to write the clause number, and exact word by word clause. So dear student, you can write in your own words, you can write in your own language, but some technical terms you cannot replace with general terms. If you are practicing to learn the clause number with the requirement of the clause, and you're writing in the same manner, it will definitely help you in getting good marks, right? If you are not remembering the clause number correctly, then do not write. But try to develop the habit that you are able to learn the clause number with the requirement, and you are writing the same also in the examination, because sometimes it impacts your marks also. You might have seen in the examination also, in the court also, if we give reference of decided case laws or provisions specifically, it really matters. Would you like to add on something, Achal sir, in this?
No, so I think you have nicely covered most of the aspects. And anyways, we have a lot of other queries. So there are a lot of insights we are anyways going to discuss. Huh? Yeah, so I'll pick up this next one now. So there are again a lot of queries around the revision strategy. So what should be the revision strategy? And of course, how do we cover the syllabus? Because the syllabus is too vast. And some of the students like Anuj, Alok, Nidhi, Ayush, Shweta, uh, Anugya. So they have shared this query. So I'll just share some insights around this, and of course, then Karuna ma'am, you can also add to this. See, in terms of the revision strategy, of course, we are going to discuss this ABC analysis today. That will help you to a great extent as to what should be your revision strategy. Of course, you can have your own revision strategy other than the one that we suggest. But if you consider some of those aspects, that will help you. As far as the syllabus coverage is concerned, see, ABC analysis is something wherein we try to focus more on the important areas, then we don't focus more on the less important areas. So that's, you can say, the approach which is generally required to be considered, which is appropriate. So some of the important areas you'll always want to focus more on. For example, if you talk about amendments, now amendments we understand is important for your exam. So if you ignore the amendments, that means you are ignoring a great deal. Yeah, so if you cover that, so that means there's a good chance that the question is going to be there from the amendment. So you can say that is more about a smart strategy, but that doesn't mean that you can just ignore some of the topics, or you can just leave aside some of the chapters. That you shouldn't do. At certain point of time, you may get into a situation wherein you may think that you do not want to cover each and everything. So therein again, when you try to be selective, so just make sure that you are selective in terms of what is it that you are trying to focus more on and less on. So selective should not be that you are ignoring altogether. So you should be trying to cover, at least just read through, so that you can have some understanding. So you never know where the question is going to come from. So at times it may happen that there is a very so you can say there is a topic which you believe to be of least importance, but let's suppose you have a question in the exam from that topic as well. Yeah, so what do you do that? So that's why it's always appropriate to ensure that nothing gets missed out. At least just read through that. So even if you find that to be too technical, too complex, doesn't matter, just spare some time for that, and that's how you should be approaching that. In terms of the revision strategy, of course, we are going to discuss with the help of the ABC analysis, and something that now Karuna ma'am can also guide you on this.
So, dear students, Achal sir has very nicely explained, and in the upcoming PPT also we have ABC analysis. But dear students, of course, syllabus is divided into 19 chapters, and Achal sir has at the beginning only shown you the section-wise and like weightage. For section 1, you have seen that chapter 1 to 11 purely based on engagement and quality control standards, and you see 45% to 55% is weightage for that. Section 2 and 4, of course, weightages come less, but it's very important and very simple topics if we emphasize on that, if we understand the concept, we can definitely get full marks in that. So what we need to do technically, we can segregate our whole curriculum, and if we study 2 to 3 hours on daily basis, and we are doing multiple revision, definitely in the examination your recall issue and your revision problem will be sorted. So if we are like, if we see how many standards are there, total 46 standards are there which are applicable in your which are there in your curriculum, right? So all those 46 standards are given in your 1 to 11 number chapter. 8, 9, 10, 11 chapters are purely essay 800, SAE, SRE, SRS. And these are only basic and overview. And the question will be asked from your study material only. You need not to refer the detailed standard for that. Whatever is being covered in your study material is only applicable for your examination. And generally, two questions are being asked from these 4 topics, right? Maybe 4 marks, 5 + 4 marks, any combination can be. But yes, so these 4 topics, these are purely knowledge and comprehension based. It's very simple topic. If you divide your syllabus like every day, 46 standards are there for 46 days. Every day, if you are doing one standard, and next day you are revising that, and another standard you are taking, and next day again you are revising. So multiple revision if you have done in your examination, that recall issue will not happen, and you will be able to revise it in faster manner. Maintain one register, important provisions, important questions which are covering major provisions, more pointers should be noted at one place, so that in the 2 days duration which you get for preparation, you are able to revise all those important points, all those questions wherein you find difficulty. Before examination, you have revised everything. So normal revision you are doing, but those questions which you have marked, that you have to practice. Those questions which are covering more pointers, those questions, those concepts where you are finding difficulty, it should be mentioned in your revision register, so that before examination you are revising, right? Saransh booklet is there, of which you can take help, right? So for revision, first you need to read all the concepts carefully, then comes shortcut revision wala part. So if you are studying with the shortcut, then you will not be able to understand the requirement of the question which is being asked in the examination. Many times students are confused which standard will be applicable in that particular question. Reason behind, because they are studying with flowcharts or shortcut. So when they are not aware of the requirement or importance of that particular standard, they are not able to understand the requirement of the questions, and they write general answer. That is the reason when we come from the examination, when we are back to home, we feel we have done wonderful. Our paper was, we have covered very nicely. But when it comes time to see your result, we feel disappointed, because what we have done, we applied those concepts in general which are there in many of the standards, and we have not done in-depth study. So the things which we should refer for revision, the material we should refer for revision should not be referred for in-depth study. So please do not skip any of the topic and try to have in-depth study. Conceptual clarity is very important. Then only you will be able to understand the requirement of the question. So if you are taking one standard every day, you are revising 2 days simultaneously, you are having writing practice also, at least 1 or 2 questions you are writing, reviewing that whether you are able to understand the requirement of the question, you are writing required and relevant answer. Then your homework for your examination will be half done, because thereafter you need to attempt mock test papers, so that you are able to manage your time in effective and efficient manner. So first thing is you have to have in-depth study. For revision, you can refer Saransh or any other shortcut flow charts or revision part, right? And huh. And then we have received lot many queries also, Achal. Just now
Yeah,
I
yeah,
got
sure.
another print of the queries also.
Yeah, yeah,
So
but I think once we are able to cover some of these themes,
I
sort
think
of,
these queries will be
yeah,
resolved, right?
yes, yes,
So
automatically
I think
most of the
all the
other
queries,
queries. Yeah,
yeah, all the queries are covered in our PPT. So
correct,
better
correct.
let's first cover that PPT, and in between
Yes,
let me go through all the queries which I have received just now. If any of
yes,
the new query I have received, I will definitely take up. But one
right.
thing Satish has asked, does writing correct clause, schedule and part will fetch mark even if we don't write the whole provision or writing only the half provision for professional ethics? Satish, as I mentioned, while answer presentation skill on answers, I mentioned that if you are writing provision, you are writing fact of the case and you are not interlinking and giving the conclusion, then also stepwise marking for conclusion will also be not given. You need to interlink. The chartered accountant is guilty or not guilty. You need to apply those provision in that situation, interlink it, and then conclusion is required. If you are simply writing clause number, fact of the case is given in the question only, and your writing is guilty or not guilty. You have not interlinked the same, then also your conclusion marks will be gone. So only like if you are writing clause number, schedule and part, that will also not serve the purpose. You will not get marks for that. You need to write all the steps which are there prescribed for professional ethics or for any application based question. So for application based, you need to understand fact of the case is required, provision, explanation, and interlinking with conclusion. So these steps are very important for getting full marks also in the application based question. Yeah, Achal, I think let's move to those slides because these will address all the queries of the students. And still, if there will be any pending, we will take up that.
Right, right. But I believe there are a couple of other things we can just quickly pick up. So one,
Yeah,
as you
sure.
already touched upon in terms of retention and memorization techniques, I think this is one we have already touched upon. But there are some queries related to this low scores and exam performance confidence. I think this is one part we can discuss because there are a lot of students who remain worried in terms of the low scores and who are low on confidence. So I think it's important for each and every student to understand that, see, when you talk about this audit as a subject, please don't consider this to be a theory subject to begin with. So that's how I look at it. Why? Because, see, audit is what? Audit is a practical subject. So if let's suppose you apply this later on, what do you do? Do you go and read the theory? Answer is no. So you'll have to apply that practically. So if you relate some of the things which you do in terms of your articleship at times, so what do? You are applying the audit practically to the audit of the financial statements or any audit for that matter that you are performing. So whenever you get into a situation wherein you believe that this is going to be a bit difficult for you and that's why your confidence is going to be low, so just remember that in the exam you'll have to just think through as if you are the auditor in terms of the any questions that you face, and of course how do you apply that if let's suppose you are the auditor. I think automatically most of your doubt should go away with that simple approach, right? Okay, yeah, sure. So now I think we can just move on to the ABC analysis, is it?
Yes. So if any of the query will be remain unanswered, because I think we have tried to cover everything in our slides. So if it
Yes,
is not there, then we will touch upon any additional queries which I have received. I'm just going through.
sure.
One Viharika Nikhil is asking about the recorded video. So dear students, it's live only and recorded video will not be available. So for next upcoming session also, my request to all of you, please attend this 3 to 5 p.m. only because thereafter recorded version are not available. These are only live sessions. So no recording is available. So please attend, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. All right. So now I think we can just move on to this next aspect, which is about the ABC analysis, or you can say, see, ABC analysis is nothing but the way you can just approach your examination preparation as well. Yeah. And of course, this ABC analysis is not something which you can say is the way to go. You can always have your own ABC analysis. By ABC analysis, what we have tried to cover over here is some of the more important areas from the examination perspective, wherein you can just say that even though they appear to be technical to you at times, or even though they appear to be quite lengthy or quite bulky at times, but from examination perspective, they are considered to be quite important. Okay. So some of the topics, for example, if you talk about quality control, audit planning in terms of these auditing standards 300, 520, 540, 600. Okay, so the standards that you have on the reporting requirement 700, 701, professional ethics, caro, so all of these are considered to be extremely important. Okay, then we have this second category sort of, which is again dealing with some of the auditing standards in relation to 240, 250, 260. Then you have this audit evidence in relation to the auditing standard 500, 501, 505. When you talk about this governance and ESG, again, an upcoming area, but extremely important area. And we also talked about it that you have a sort of short question on this particular area in the examination. Audit of PSU, due diligence, investigation, and forensic accounting that you have. Then you have this digital audit, okay, which is actually the future, which is the need of the hour. Group audit, bank and NBFC audit. Now bank and NBFC audit, this appears to be more of regulatory in nature, so there are a lot of you can say provisions which you need to learn over there, something that we also see in so just now in case of amendments as well. Okay, then you have some specialized areas in relation to these SA 800, or you can say the series of 800. Summary of review engagements, you have summary of standards on related services, and then you have some assurance engagements, which are again sort of specialized, but which do not really deal with the historical information. They actually deal with the prospective, or you can say the projected one. So this is the one that we are going to now discuss. So now what we will do is we will just try to touch upon some of these aspects as a sort of revision in terms of these areas. And of course, alongside, if you have any questions, any doubts around these topics, we can discuss. But please understand that some of these topics that we pick up are important from the examination perspective, and some of these discussions that we are going to do, you need to understand as you know how do you approach that in the exam. So SQC1 is
Achal sir, I think after
Yes.
section 1, standards, we will take some of the query, then we will move to our next part, right?
Yes, sure. So after each
Okay.
slide, we'll keep picking up the queries.
Ah.
Yes. So now
Yes.
SQC1,
Yes.
I would say one of the most important for every chartered accountant. Why? Because see, this standard basically deals with what policies and procedures for a CFO, as simple as that. So you can just simply relate this to a company. So for a company, what do? You have SOPs, which is about standard operating procedures. Every company will have its objectives, policies, procedures in place as to how they run the business. So same goes with a CA firm as well. Now for a CA firm, because they are regulated, so that's why it's specified in the form of standard on quality control 1. Now, what is peculiar about this standard? See, this standard is not some things which is specific to an engagement. Why? Because it applies to the professional firm as a whole. Okay. So for a professional firm, now this standard talks about some elements. Leadership. Now, if let's suppose a professional firm has to maintain the quality, so what do they need to have? They need to have the quality parameters in place. And where do they come from? They have to come from the leadership. Just think about an organization wherein the leadership is not really focused on the quality. So can it really go down to the middle level or the low level? Answer is no. right? Similarly, when you talk about some of the compliances in relation to, you can say, training piece, in relation to HR piece, now all of these will form part of the policies and procedures for a professional firm. So that's how the professional firms are really required to look into each and every engagement. So when let's suppose a professional firm has to accept an engagement, let's suppose if they have to continue with an engagement, now what is it that they need to do? Now, will they keep thinking about it every time they get an engagement, or will they be getting into a new thing? Answer is no. Again, there has to be a policy in place. That's how the professional firm has to go about. So every time they can just go and refer that this is the policy they follow. And what will become the basis for that policy? Again, paramount has to be the quality consideration for every professional firm. Similarly, if you talk about some of the requirements in relation to execution of an engagement, some of the considerations which every professional firm needs to have in place. What is that? Resource allocation. So how the resources are going to be allocated, whether the resources are in place or not. If the resources are available, do they fit the criteria of the companies which are required to be audited? If at all those are required to be audited, and if the resources are in place, will they be available at the time the engagement is going to start? Let's suppose April to May is the period when most of the audit engagements will be going on, wherein the staff required will be, say, 40 people. But as of now, on the basis of the resource allocation that we have, there's a shortage. Now, with the shortage, will the firm be able to deliver the quality? Answer is no, right? So all of these aspects, therefore, come from what? Come from the quality control parameters. Similarly, if let's suppose an engagement is started, let's suppose planning is done, everything, all of those aspects have been looked at in relation to that engagement. Now, will there be an EQCR on that engagement or not? Now, where do you get to see this? So that again comes from the policies, procedures. Now, which all engagements will be subject to the one which will have EQCR? EQCR stands for External Quality Control Review. Now, what is going to be the role of the EQCR? Which all engagements are going to be reviewed by the EQCR? What is the criteria for selection of the EQCR? If let's suppose tomorrow there's a conflict between the engagement partner and the EQCR, how is that conflict going to be resolved? What is the conflict mechanism? So at that point of time, when the conflict arises, any sort of problem arises, will the firm get on to that? Answer is no. So all of these are therefore required to be looked at through this SQC1. Similarly, if let's suppose the documentation is talked about. Now, documentation we understand is the most important requirement for any audit engagement. Now, what if the audit is completed, but the documentation is not completed? Or what if the documentation is completed, but let's suppose that's not been archived? So there is again a parameter. There is again a criteria, the way the documentation is required to be put in place. And it's something which has to be available in a manner which can be referred to by the future audit teams. But when they are going to refer to that, so is it available in a view only mode, or anybody can come in and make additions, or you can say editing to the existing documentation? So that's what you call as archival also. So this SQC1 talks about the archival criteria. Similarly, if let's suppose you are talking about various engagement partners, say the firm has got 9 engagement partners, and all of those are subject to these quality parameters. Let's suppose they have been following this. What is the monitoring mechanism of the firm in such a case? Right? So how do the, you can say, how do the managing partner or how would the leadership ensure that the control is something which is being followed? So this monitoring is something which has to be looked at, which has to be applied by the firm. So how do you do that? Maybe through the reviews of their engagement files, of the documents that they have. At times you get to call it as internal practice reviews or called reviews. Yeah, so different terminologies are used by different professional firms in relation to some of those aspects. Now, all of these requirements are also covered by SQC1. Similarly, when you talk about ethical requirements, independence, again, very important criteria for an auditor, something which is fundamental. Now, how will the firm ensure the independence? How will the firm ensure that the ethical requirements in respect of all of the engagements have been put in place, that has been covered in respect of all the employees of the organization, particularly one who are there on the job? So what is the mechanism? So there has to be some independence declaration by the employees, by the engagement partner. Then there has to be some monitoring mechanism as well, that let's suppose if you have these submissions on the independence declaration, so somebody is reviewing that the submissions are in line with what is really required to be in place, right? So you can say this is what this SQC1 talks about. Now let's talk about SA 220. Now, SA 220 again talks about quality control, but you can say to a certain extent, what is SA 220? SA 220 is nothing but an application of SQC1 in relation to an engagement. Say, there's a professional firm, PQR and Company. They have this SQC1. SQC1, you can say, is a document. Say it's a policy document, right? Now, PQR and Company, they are auditing the financial statements of a company. Let's suppose it's company 1. Similarly, they have this company 2. Similarly, they have this company 3. Now, application of various quality control parameters. How will the engagement partner do that? That will be done through this SA 220. Okay, so SA 220 will be used for that. But in a way, while applying SA 220, what is the firm doing, or what is the engagement partner required to follow? Engagement partner is required to follow SQC1 in respect of all of these. So you can say SQC1 basically talks about firm as a whole while looking at the quality control parameters, whereas SA 220 is more of engagement specific. It's not something which flows down to the entire organization. Of course, it will have to be picked up from what is there in SQC1, but it's something which is more of engagement specific. So that's the broad difference that we understand between these two. Now, supposedly are considered to be extremely important, not only from your examination perspective, but tomorrow when you apply these as a chartered accountant in terms of your professional firm, in terms of the engagements that you do, considered to be extremely important, right? So now, I think before we move further, any questions around this we can discuss?
Not on this, but yeah, many questions are there. So I thought
Yes.
let's take in between now.
Yeah,
So Harmandeep Kaur asked, I have a query regarding the expected approach to answer writing in audit. The suggested answer published by ICAI are often quite detailed and lengthy. In the actual examination, completing such extensive answer for every question within the prescribed time appears challenging. May I kindly know whether students are expected to reproduce the same wording and level of detail as the suggested answer, or whether concise answer written in our own words, while covering all the relevant technical points, are equally accepted for full marks, right? And same kind of query is being asked from Sara also. So first of all, Harmandeep ji, students are expected to write the technical points which are being asked, right? Suggested answers are definitely lengthy because, as I told you, for 4 marks question, you need to write 4 pointers. But in suggested answers, you might observe sometimes 10, 12 or 15 points because you never know which 4 points student will be finding easy to write in the examination. So you need to see what is the requirement of the question, how many marks are allotted to that. But yes, as I mentioned earlier, that if the question requires you to write 5 different things, then you need to write all those 5. That you can, you just read the question carefully, you'll be able to understand what is the requirement of that particular question. But yes, the suggested answers are lengthy one, because if we read any of the points, student can refer. Secondly, for application based questions, definitely you need to write in detail. In-depth understanding you need to show, because if you have seen, some of the answers are in short also. But if you miss 1 or 2 liner, then also it will not impact, because important technical point should be forming part of your answer. Next thing is whether students are expected to reproduce the same wording. I think this was the query of many students. And while
Right.
we were answering the queries, this I already mentioned that we don't expect you to write verbatim. Word by word, we don't expect you to learn, memorize, and write. But yes, technical terms should not be replaced. Misstatement can't be replaced with mistake. Opinion means some technical terms you cannot replace, because auditing terminology you have to follow for that. Which generally word file will also show you that misstatement, there will be grammatical error, and if you will see synonym, it will go to mistake. So those you can write in your own words, you can write in your own language, but technical terms cannot be. Disclaimer of opinion, you cannot replace it. Adverse opinion, you cannot replace. Modified opinion. So technical terms you have to write, right? Professional misconduct, other misconduct. You should not be confused. Both are different. So when you are answering in the examination for professional ethics question, whether CA is liable for professional misconduct or other misconduct, you need to carefully read what is the requirement of the question, whether it is for professional misconduct or other misconduct. According to that, your conclusion should also be in same manner. So we don't expect you to write word by word. You can write in your own words, you can write in your own language, but important reference should be forming part of your answer if you want to get full marks or more than 60 marks, good marks. Then you need to develop this habit that you are giving reference of provision. You are explaining it, like if the question is based on certain proviso, which is given in the clause, that you need to write, right? If the question is based on regulation, you need to write that. Explain it and conclude it. For knowledge based question, it's very clear. For 4 marks, 5 marks. If the answer is of half point or 1 word, then you need to write double or whatever answer is there. But if the detailed pointers are there according to requirement of the question and marks, you need to write. Suggested are definitely lengthy one, because when we read the lengthy one, we are able to write relevant part in the examination. If we read 2 lines, we will not be able to write 4 lines in the examination. Next is Meera is asking, in professional ethics, will the old provision of first and second schedule be relevant for the exam? And in question 2, in audit report, where should EOM and other matter para be included? So professional ethics, old provision for November 26 examination, revised code of ethics is not applicable. So whatever is being given in your study material, all the clauses are applicable, all the provisions are applicable. Apart from that, amendments, Achal sir has also covered. It is also forming part of revisionary test paper, 2 clauses, and tax audit wala guideline chapter is applicable for your November examination. Of course, for May 27, whole revised code of ethics will be applicable. So for your November 26, this much is applicable. EOM and OM para, these are emphasis on meta para and other meta para. Achal sir, would you like to take up this?
Yeah, definitely. So what's the query?
Yeah. in audit report, where should EOM and OM para be included?
Right. So what I'll do is I'll in fact move on to this series of report
Reporting
alongside.
part. Yeah.
And
Perfect.
alongside I'll pick up this EOM as well as other matter paragraph. See, when you talk about
Before
report,
that, I think let's take two more query and
yeah,
then
sure.
we should shift to this.
Yes.
Kinjal is asking, will 1 mark MCQ be case study MCQ or independent? Dear students, it can be in combination. Your case scenario, it is not at all essential that 3 MCQs or 4 MCQs are there, all are of 2 marks. It is not at all essential. It can be combination of 2 mark or 1 mark, right? Depending on the complex.
Sumit, I think we have lost. Okay, no worries. No worries. So please let me know once she's back. In the meantime, I'll just move further. Okay. All right. So students, I think ma'am should soon be back. In the meantime, we'll just start discussing on some of the other aspects which are considered to be important from the examination perspective. Now we were talking about this reporting requirement, yeah, supposedly considered to be extremely important. Now, when you talk about this entire audit, which might be going on for so many days, so many months, so many weeks at times, again, depending on the type of engagement it is, depending on the type of entity is it. And again, you can have complexity in terms of the entity, in terms of their business, in terms of their structure, in terms of the number of entities that you face. The report is something which stands out. Why? Because it's the only deliverable in a way which is going from the auditor to the auditor. Yes or no? Why? Because audit is what you can say it's a kind of service which is provided, but the deliverable happens to be only one. And what is that? Audit report. So that's what make this reporting part extremely important. And again, from examination perspective, you'll find this reporting to be extremely important. Now, when you talk about this reporting requirement, so you have various auditing standards talking about the report. So you have this SA 700, which talks about the opinion, or you can say basically the main auditing standard, which talks about various elements of the audit report one will have, right? Various elements which are there in the audit report. Now, when you look at the audit report, what do you find therein? Audit report will have some of the standardized elements. So you'll have header, you'll have addressee, you'll have opinion, basis for opinion. Then you have this emphasis of matter, if at all it is applicable. Then you have the management's responsibility, auditor's responsibility, other reporting requirements, right? A lot of requirements are there. Now, all of these are specified by this SA 700. So you can say basically it's a framework and it's also a structure. It also gives the content of the report. Now, generally, if you look at the audit report, so over here we are talking about the report on the audit of the financial statements. So that is quite standardized. Standardized in the sense that there's a format which is prescribed. There's an order in which the format is required to be put in place. All the elements are required to be put in place. Plus, the wording is also quite standardized. Except for, of course, if at all you say that there are some modifications. Yes or no? Otherwise, the wording is standardized, and even in case of modifications, you have the standardized wordings for the modification, right? And that's where one element of the audit report stands out. And what is that? CAM, which is covered by SA 701. Now, what is CAM? CAM means key audit matter. So you can say this is one way through which auditor is interacting with the stakeholder. See, there is no other way auditor to interact with the stakeholders or the stakeholders to interact with the auditor. Why? Because if you look at the audit report, you can say the audit report is quite boring and quite standardized also. So there's one element which makes this boring document interesting, or you can say sort of interactive, happens to be what? Key audit matters. Now, what are key audit matters? Key audit matters are all about those matters which the auditor believes. Again, there are some parameters which the auditing standard suggests, which are quite significant in terms of the efforts involved on the part of the auditor. Say the audit team has involved significant efforts on audit of inventory valuation. Yeah, so significant efforts means significant efforts on the part of senior members of the audit team. So that could be the one basis. Or you can say there is a significant matter. Why? Because that was quite complex to deal with, involve significant judgments on the part of the auditor. And you can say it also involved to a great extent accounting policy choices at times, right? Which again required some sort of judgment on the part of the management, and wherein the auditor was also required to apply similar sort of judgments. Okay. Or you can say some of those matters which the auditor will communicate with TCWG, those charged with governance, right? So that's how you look into some of these matters. That's how you look into some of these camps. Yeah. But when you talk about CAM, generally there is a thought process on the part of the management. What do they think? They think as if it's a kind of negative reporting. But please understand, it's not a negative reporting. It's the way to communicate by the auditor to the stakeholders that these are the areas which auditor believed were important and which are important for the stakeholders to know. So does it mean that all the important areas will be listed down? Answer is no. Again, the idea is not to load the audit report with too many areas. Of course, some of the selected quite significant areas are reported by the auditor. Now, considering the fact it's not a negative reporting. So what are the things that the auditor will communicate in the CAM document? So auditor will talk about what is CAM and why it has become a CAM. Yeah, so that's one part auditor will have to bring out. Let's suppose auditor says that revenue recognition happens to be a CAM. So why the revenue recognition is considered as CAM? Means what is so special about it, what is so complex about it, or what is so significant in terms of revenue recognition because of which it's been considered as CAM. And please remember, it has to be entity specific, it can't be generic in nature. Okay. Now, if let's suppose it's not a negative reporting, so that means auditor has looked at this significant area and it's good to go. Means there's no material misstatement, right? So is the auditor providing a separate opinion here? Answer is no. See, the opinion will there be on the set of financial statements as a whole. Over here, auditor will now also present audit procedures that he would have performed on those camps. All the procedures, auditor will list down that in terms of revenue recognition assertion wise, that this is what I did for a cutoff, this is what I did for completeness, this is what I did. Okay, it has to be very, very specific to the CAM matter. And CAM matter again doesn't have to be generic in nature. And of course, because it's a CAM, so that means it reflects to something in the financial statements. So the reference of that area in the financial statements is also required to be captured. Right. So this is how the CAM is required to be put in place. Then we can talk about modifications. Now, modification again is a very important area as far as the financial statements are concerned. Now, what is so special about the modification? See, modification reflects what? Material misstatements, and that is where your choice of wordings in the examination become important. And that's what I think Karna ma'am also mentioned, that you can't use the terms which the auditor will not be using. So when you talk about material modifications, sorry, modification, so that reflects a material misstatement. Now, misstatement could be an error, but if let's suppose that's a material one, that's what will lead to a modification. Now, modifications we understand could be of three types. So it could be a qualification, it could be an adverse opinion, or it could be a disclaimer of opinion. So that's how you look at the modifications. Now, when do you go for qualified opinion as an auditor? So if let's suppose there is a material misstatement, but that's not pervasive, that's when you will qualify. Now, in this case, you may have two situations. Auditor asked for the information, didn't get the information, but the impact was material. Or the auditor asked for the information and got the information. Again, okay, so I can see Karuna ma'am is back. Yeah. Yes. So we are just discussing about the reporting requirements. I think while you were not in place. So we are just discussing about the modification. So once I'm through with that, then I think we can just come back to the queries of the students again, and then we can continue on this. And in terms of the adverse opinion, now let's talk about the adverse opinion. So when do you have this adverse opinion? When the misstatement is material as well as pervasive. But now you should have a situation wherein the auditor asked for the information and received everything. So that's when you go for adverse. Third, disclaimer. So when the misstatement is material as well as pervasive, but the situation has to be the one wherein the auditor asked for the information but didn't get it. So that's where the auditor will talk about the possible effect. Why? Because he doesn't have the information. So how can he have the actual impact? So you'll have to look at the possible effect. Yeah. So these are the three modifications that you get to see. Right. So we'll continue on that. Before that, we can discuss some of your queries again, and then we'll continue on this. Yes. Karna ma'am, you can just
I think
discuss some of the questions now.
Once. Yeah. डेटा आ रहा है, नाम लिखा हुआ. So actually, due to technical glitch, I disconnected actually. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible now.
Okay.
You're audible now. Yeah. So we just discussed briefly on the reporting part. So I can continue on this once we discuss some more queries. I think students will be waiting for their queries to be addressed.
Sure. So, Ramakrishnan ji, you have written how to mug up and remember all the topics as the study material is too used to read and revise, running to more than 2000 pages. How to study we have tried to touch upon, but first thing I want to just clarify that study material is not of 2000 pages, right? It is like not even 1500 pages. So you have not counted correctly. Okay? Then as I mentioned that if you in the beginning only, Achal sir has shown you skill wise weightage wala screen. In that you have seen that section 1 we have mentioned chapter 1 to chapter 11 is your standards related chapters. Section 2 is digital auditing and assurance. Section 3 is covering all other audits. Section 4 is ESG and Section 5 is professional ethics, right? So what I suggested every day, if you try to understand and learn one standard, right? So what I really want you to allot, not complete 7 days or 10 days. I want you to study. Like today we are on 25th August and we are having our examination in November, right? 6th November is our auditing paper. So still, if you start studying, 46 standards are there. Every day you are studying one standard. Maybe it will take 1 hour, 1.5 hours, or maybe 2 hours. For 1 hour, what I want you to along with standard, if you study professional also, that can you divide into 5 to 7 days strategy. Like today till KYC we have covered. Then we have touched upon first schedule. First schedule also not whole first schedule. So we need to segregate it into certain sections. So like apart from standard, we are studying professional ethics. So you have seen 45% to 55% weightage for the section 1. And section 5 is again 20 to 27 marks. So if we see overall section 1 and 5 make us like in a stronger position. But it doesn't mean that you should skip section 2 or section 4. You need to study section 2 and 4 also. So in 7 days duration or 8 days duration, when your professional ethics is completed, then you can start with either digital wala part or ESG. So 7 days duration, if you are segregating the topic rather than completing the whole topic in 1 or 2 days, you have divided it into 5 days or 7 days strategy for 1 hour on regular basis, and you are doing multiple revision. What we have studied today, tomorrow we are revising, and next day again we are touching upon the same, and we are writing 2 questions also. So that way our paper completion writing speed is also increased. Analytical skills are also improvised because we are reading the question carefully. We are understanding the requirement of the question, because one of the student has written how to present the answer, how to know keywords. Sarah Bichu is writing, confused between what to write and what is not required, and ended up writing the irrelevant points. How to tackle that? How to retain audit for long time? Keywords, clause number, confused between principles of BRSR. Can we quote more than one principle? If in doubt, tips to prepare for the case scenario based MCQ. So all those means many of the queries are on the same. So that is the reason I'm telling you multiple revisions are very important, rather than completing the whole chapter in 1 day or 2 day and then again touching on like after 15 days or 1 month or 1.5 months. So we will not be able to once. So this way, our standards are going on 46 days. We mentioned we are also through with professional ethics in first 7 days duration. Next 7 days, we have touched upon digital auditing and assurance. First, we need to understand the difference between both the topics, right? Cyber security. This time the question was on that. We are getting confused. We are not able to understand the requirement of question. So if we are writing 2 questions every day and we are reviewing, so that issue will be resolved, that how to know keywords, what to write and what is not required. Because what you are doing, you are auditing your answers on daily basis. So in the examination, you will catch those words and you will not repeat that mistake that you are confused with some other concept. And it might happen, but in only 1 or 2 questions. If you complete 6 proper questions, you are in safe zone. Apart from MCQ and case scenario, if you have completed, you are in safe zone, right? So that is very important. Then if you are confused with clause number, principle of BRSR, so that is the reason I'm saying you please divide it. 9 principles are there. You need to understand. You will not get confused because each principle talk about some specific point. One might be about disclosure, consumers' right? So first you need to read rather than in hurry. If you are completing the whole chapter in 1 day or 2 day and you feel that yes, we have done, it is not at all sufficient. In auditing,
you need multiple revision. And if you are doing 2 revisions simultaneously apart from studying and in-depth study, whatever you have studied in best of the with best of the efficiency, best of the ability, you will not get confused with principles or any other clause. So each and every clause speak about unique situation. There is no confusion. Sometimes class 6 and 7 students are confused when they talk with us. We said just read the clause 6 and all the conditions given after that. And in clause 7, one is about solicitation, another is about advertisement. Both are altogether different. So if you are reading only 2 lines or 4 lines, then confusion will happen. So first thing, please don't go for shortcut. Whatever you are studying, please study in depth so that what the answer you are writing in the examination, you are writing complete, required and relevant answer. You will not run on another points, or you will here and there we are moving and we are not on that particular requirement of that question. In the May 26 examination also, one question was from investigation perspective, but student answered on normal audit procedures. So first you need to understand the question is of investigation. The requirement will be of investigation pointers. It is not talking about auditing point of view. So that is very important that you read the question. So this is a very good question. Sarah, you have asked very good question. How to know keywords? For that, you need to start preparing now. You need to write at least 2 answers, audit them. What was there and compare with answer also. What was the requirement of that particular question? Which lines were indicating that? Whether we are writing those requirements or not. What kind of issues we are facing? Are we not able to recall, or are we not able to understand the requirement? We are interlinking it with some other standard or some other clause or some other provision, then conceptual clarity is lacking, in-depth study is lacking. If we are able to understand, but we are not able to recall, then revision strategy is required. Twice and thrice revision and writing practice. I can write that you will, if you are going in right direction, if you are developing this habit, you will get more than 60 marks. So in-depth study and writing skill both are very important. So daily basis, at least write 2 questions and audit that. Your subject you have to implement. And in difficult question, as Achal sir has also mentioned, and in the beginning also I mentioned in my couplet, think from the auditor's perspective, your future chartered accountant. If I am auditor, how I will pursue, how I will proceed further, right? So these 2000 pages you can make, these are, first of all, these are 1000 pages only, which I made 2000. But then these 1000 pages also you can make it in shorter. You will see that professional ethics chapter alone is of maybe 170, 180 pages, right? Maybe more than that. Reason behind, lot many questions are there. Lot many tests or understanding, lot many examples are given in that chapter. If we are incorporating flow charts or learning techniques or images, then it will be interactive, interesting, but then pages will be increased. So don't think from that perspective. You need to understand the requirement of standard, in which situation it will be applicable, as Achal sir was telling you about SQC1 and SA 220. Both talks about quality control. But then you need to understand when SQC1 will be applicable, when SA 220 will be applicable. And that you can determine only when your concepts are clear, ki when SQC1 will be applicable. Because pointers are almost, sometimes you will see same. So that in-depth reading, in-depth study is very important. And practicing question. And after, once you are through with the syllabus, then you need to have practice of mock test. At least 2 mock tests. That 3 hours duration, how you are going to manage, how you are going to manage the time, revision time, how much you have kept for it. You see 15 descriptive question, 23 MCQs. Case scenario booklet is also there. Don't solve the whole case scenario booklet in one go. Divide it in one day, at least 23 to 25 MCQs you have to solve. How much time it is taking, how much time you are taking to understand, to solve it. Because it should be solved in 40 minutes duration, 30 to 40 minutes duration, your MCQ part should be over. Because you have to solve 15 descriptive question also. And 10 minutes we must have for revision. And during 15 minutes reading time, you have to strategize the paper, how you are going to attack, how you are going to attempt, which question you know the best, how you are going to start. So that is really very, very important point. Right? And I think EOM and other matter, Achal sir has already explained, or it's still we need to
Yeah,
explain.
so I have to just touch upon this. I'll just quickly explain. So in
Okay,
terms of this
okay.
EOM and other matter,
Yeah.
see, EOM other matter, first of all, generally when you see in terms of the confusion, it's not a negative reporting. Okay? It's like the way to highlight for an auditor. See, EOM is in respect of an area which is there in the financial statements, which the auditor will want to highlight to the stakeholders. Now, what is the criteria behind that? Standard says something which is of fundamental importance to the user's understanding. That's what you call as EUM. Now, for EUM, you have a reference in the audit report in terms of what is there in the financial statements, whether it's recognized or disclosed, whichever be the case. Now, where do you place this? After this basis for opinion that you have, that's how you place it, or after this CAM that you have, that's how you place it. Again, CAM is not something which is applicable to all the entities now. Now, what is other matter paragraph? Other matter paragraph again is a way to highlight for the auditor, but it's not in respect of those matters which are there in the financial statements. It's just in respect of some of things which might not be there in the financial statements. Say, for example, when you talk about the group auditor, so the group auditor wants to discuss that some of the components group auditor has not audited. So that's what the group auditor will try to cover with the help of other matter paragraph. Let's suppose the auditor wants to talk about the previous auditor. Say previous year financial statements were audited by somebody else. Now you will not have this reference in the financial statements. So how will the auditor communicate this to the stakeholders? Through other matter paragraph. Yeah, so both of these are separately required to be included, but please understand, unlike the other elements of the audit report, these are not two fixed elements. So these will arise only when these will apply. Okay, yeah, so that's how you need to look into it. And quickly, just to touch upon this other information now, for the other information, what the auditor will do is auditor will do a consistency check, because a lot of information will go alongside the audit report. So that's why auditor will say that, okay, this is the other information which is going alongside. I'm just making sure that this is in consistency with what is there in the financial statements. But the auditor is not giving any separate opinion on that, for that matter. Yeah, so that's why this is again considered to be quite important. So I would say these are some of the things which you need to consider from the reporting perspective. I would say out of these reporting perspective areas, some of the things which I'll want to focus more on always will always be CAM. Yeah, so this is going to be the most important area, and of course modifications. I am sure the examiner must also be thinking from the similar perspective, but this is my personal approach. So this is one thing which I'll always want to focus on whenever the reports are required to be looked at. But one of the things which I have also observed in some of the questions that we have, that you are also required to draft maybe a para in the audit report. So that's where you need an understanding. Okay, so there again, whether you go verbatim or not, you need to have an understanding in terms of drafting, and that's not something which you will be able to do just by memorizing or just by mugging up. That's where the written practice becomes all the more important. See, for the case-based scenarios wherein you are trying to just answer, you can always apply your thoughts and put it across. But if, let's suppose, you are required to draft any particular para of the audit report, if you have not done the written practice around it, then you will find it extremely difficult during the examination. So that's one area I believe you need to practice in writing. Karuna ma'am, over to you. I think time is very little, so we can just pick up some more queries around it.
Yes, certainly. So,
So I'll also just move on to that slide for this quick reference. I think some of the
yeah,
queries were
yeah.
around the study resources and MCQ practice as well, or the case
Hmm.
studies and the unfamiliar question patterns which the students get to see. Yeah, so maybe these are the two areas that we can also discuss. Hemanta, Vinayak, Shreyas,
Yeah.
Varsha, they had this now.
So actually, study resource, you all knows that study material is published by ICAI, revisionary test paper, mock test papers, right? Suggested answers. Apart from these, we are having case scenario booklet, Saransh booklet. Saransh booklet is for your revision purpose, as you have asked how to revise faster. So all the content is there in the flowchart form, right? But Saransh also is not in very, like you will see, very short. But that is good for revision. I will not say it will be replacing the study material. Okay. Then we are having MCQ practice portal, wherein you can go log in and practice the MCQs, right? And case studies, I have mentioned that every day at least 25 MCQs you need to develop habit. If in one case scenario, there are 4 MCQs or 3 or 5. So depending on that, at least it will enhance your reading skills. And every day you are having practice of solving 25 MCQs. Next day you might feel some other strategy also to handle that. So if one go you are solving all, then like okay, of course we have gone through all the concept, but you might have also observed that nowadays the paper is having unfamiliar question, means new questions. Generally questions are not repeated, and this trend is not for this particular May exam or January exam. You see, since in 2023 generally new questions are being asked in the paper. So it is very important. First thing, we are having in-depth study. Second, we are having writing practice, audit of our answer, because one student contacted me and I said, please have writing practice. Then he got failed and he called me that, ma'am, whatever you suggested, I did that and I have done written practice also, but I failed. Then I said, what kind of errors you were observing? That I have not read my written answer. I have not checked what is the requirement. So that part will being matlab, will not be useful if you are just writing and you are not checking what kind of mistakes we are doing, because then only we'll be improvising for next step. And in the examination also we will be able to understand the requirement of the question and we will write the required and relevant answer. We will understand, we will catch those words. And you might have also observed in some of the question, situation is being given, but at the end only two liners, a very simple requirement of that question. Like this time we were having one question based on cyber security, right? Risk assessment pattern. So if you are able to read the question carefully rather than getting confused with that situation which is given in the beginning, read the requirement and then read again the questions situation, you will be very much clear rather than getting panic. Please don't get panic, read the requirement and you will be able to write the required and relevant answer. So don't get panic. Think I am future chartered accountant, but one thing you should remember, that out of 118 marks question paper, you are having 30 marks MCQ, 70 marks descriptive, 14 marks one additional choice, 4 marks internal choice. So total 118 marks question paper is there with you. Out of 118 marks, if you do not know 20 marks or 25 marks, then also it will not matter, because still you know more than 80 marks paper, and calmly with proper steps, presentation skill, if you handle that paper, nobody can stop you in having more than 60 marks. But then you need to start your practice today itself. Some of you are asking, we are having 10 to 7 job. No, you need to prioritize. I'm only asking you for 3 hours or 3.5 hours. I'm not saying ki whole day you have to, but it should be on regular basis. You have to practice. Then only we will be successful. And at the end, I also want you all to pass with good marks, and you also want that. So that is the motivation. That is the reason BOS is conducting this fortnight session to unlock your success. Right? So it's very important. Please do in-depth study. Don't skip any of the chapter. And have writing practice, at least one mock test, solve and audit that. So how we can improvise further. If you are not knowing the complete answer of that question, that partial knowledge also intelligently be applied in that question. Sometimes we are having hint, then how we are writing, that is also very important. And professional ethics is again very interesting and important topic. For standards also, you should know what is the scope, what is the objective. Each standard is unique, applicable in specific situation. So you should be knowing the scope of that standard, objective of that standard. Unique requirement means what is the auditor's responsibility, what is the auditor's role in context of that particular situation as per that standard, right? How auditor should report. All these parts are given in the standards, and these are really very, very helpful as an auditor. If you think from that perspective, you will not feel that it is difficult. So my submission is, don't study audit merely to remember the standards. Study to recognize the issue, apply the right standard, exercise professional judgment, and communicate your conclusion clearly. Means your answer should communicate the conclusion also. Am I right, Achal sir?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. See, what I've understood so far, and looking at the subject, the way it has been evolving, particularly with the focus on MCQs and the case studies, and the way the questions are not going to be repetitive. I think the messaging from the examiner is very clear. And that's what the students also need to pick up, that the examiner is expecting a conceptual understanding. I remember maybe a couple of the students asked about the mugging up requirement. See, there are certain provisions wherein you will definitely need to mug up some of the provisions, which is there in all the subjects. Even if you look at it from the accounting perspective, there are few provisions you are always required to mug up. But that doesn't mean you'll forget the conceptual understanding. So the more conceptual understanding you'll try to have for each and every concept, I'm sure there's no question which is going to bother you in the exam. Of course, you may not be able to answer that completely at times, or you may not be comfortable with that fully, but you will be able to attempt that for sure. So if you have the conceptual understanding, and very simply, and I think this is the crux, you can just draw, just try to think about it as an auditor. The moment you get into a struggling mode, that this is where I'm struggling, just think as if you are the auditor. Okay, and that's the situation in front of you. So how will you deal with that? And just try to put it down in the answer sheet, and hopefully, yeah, you should be through with that.
And for low score and exam performance confidence, I told you the reason for low score. As for 4 marks, I told you how you are attending only 1.25 marks paper. In some of the situation, I interacted with the student. They are telling the correct answer. They are knowing the provision. They are right. They are telling everything correctly. But when they are writing something else. When we connect with that, we tell them, please read. Now, what you are writing and what you are telling, both are totally different. So that is the reason I'm telling you this audit subject is very interesting and very important, and you need to audit your answer. You will not find this low score wala issue, and you will perform with confidence in the examination because you have started writing the answer by today itself. Whatever you are studying, at least one question you write. Your writing speed will be increased. Your analytical skill will be increased. You will understand that how to catch the tricky words. Pick any of the suggested, any of the question paper previous examination. Pick any of the question and write that. And check with the suggested answer where we are lacking. I am telling for ICAI resource, check with the suggested answer of either study material, RTP, mock test paper, model test paper booklet, or previous year suggested answers. And then compare what is the requirement. Okay, retention and memorization technique, I told you that if we are doing multiple revision, this issue will not happen. And after studying one standard and when we are writing the question, we will be able to know that yes, retention issue is there. Next day when we are revising, what we will do? We will more emphasize on that part where we are finding this issue. And memorization that you will develop for yourself. In some of the classes, our faculty also tells that mnemonics you can use, right? Professional ethics and technical topics, please do not skip. If you read them and have in-depth understanding, you will not find that issue. I think we have touched upon all the queries.
Yes, I think we have covered. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your slides, if any of the slide which you want to show and explain so that they are able to perform best in best of the manner, we can have that and then we can conclude also.
So I think it's not really there in the slide. We have already spoken about it, and we have tried to cover all the aspects around it. I would say just to sum up some of the things. One is, of course, the conceptual understanding which is required, and the approach has to be very clear that this is not a theory subject because the moment you have that thought process that it's a theory subject, what do you tend to do? You tend to skip some of the chapters or some of the areas, and of course just try to mug up some of the important provisions, which is not the approach you can follow, at least for this subject. You need to have a very very practical approach for this subject, and that's the way to go about it. And in terms of, I would say, the resources, because this I believe when I was also preparing, and this tends to be a constant concern from every student. So what I've observed so far, that this material of ICAI that you have, okay, all of these materials, whether you talk about study material, RTP, some of these, I think these are more than enough. So if you are trying to go beyond that, that is not really advisable. So I think this is much more than enough. If you are able to practice this one, maybe try to practice that too many times instead of just looking at 20 types of material doing once. Better to focus on some of these materials, practicing them 5 times. So I think these are some of the tips which I would say I would consider as a student if I was in your place, and very much in line with Karuna ma'am has also explained today.
So dear students, time is indicating us to conclude. We are having our next session on 27th August on paper 4. And just to some with few lines, I'm concluding the same. Just I have started the same. Lines of standards, pages wide, doubt and pressure walk aside beside. Yet calm your mind, revise with care. Success is waiting, you will reach there. Concepts clear and answers right. Turn your mehnat into light. In the end, your name will shine. Audit success will soon be thine. So with this, thank you. Thank you very much, Achal sir. Thank you to all the dear students. Thank you to tech support team. Thank you. Thank you very much for patience listening and attending the session. Thank you.
Yeah,